This is Lecture 2, the second of 5 lectures in Lesson 4 of Module 2. This lecture looks at 2 candidates, other than virtue theory, for the tool-o-matic in the moral toolbox. The 2 candidates in this case are Principlism and Communitarianism. We're considering candidates for the tool-o-matic in our moral toolbox, the tool that helps us decide whether to focus on consequences, rules, duties, or some combination. Soon we'll give virtue theory that place of honor, but not before having considered 4 other plausible candidates. We've just completed a look at 2 of those candidates, John Rawls's theory of justice and the feminist ethic of care. In this lecture, we consider 2 more candidates before getting to virtue theory, Principlism and Communitarianism. A third candidate for an effective moral theory that synthesizes the 3 basic theories and turns our attention to moral character over moral conduct is Principlism. Philosophers Tom Beecham and James Childress present this approach in their text, Principles of Biomedical Ethics. Their hope is to create a practical approach to moral decision-making in medical ethics, which would avoid the ambiguities of more theoretical approaches. Other scholars have taken this approach beyond medical ethics into other areas requiring moral judgment. Beecham and Childress propose that any moral decision in medical matters should honor 4 principles. First, respect for the autonomy of the stakeholders, usually patients, assuming the stakeholders are capable of making decisions for themselves and assuming their decisions will not cause harm to others. The principle of autonomy holds that they should be able to make final decisions about their well-being. Thus, for example, a patient might forego life-saving treatment, even though the doctor insists that such treatment could prolong the patient's life. The principle of beneficence holds that one should act for the good of the stakeholder. The doctor's recommendation, for example, should be for the patient's benefit, not the benefit of the doctor, the hospital, or the pharmaceutical companies. The principle of non-maleficence reflects the famous Hippocratic imperative, first do no harm. While the second and third principles seem to be saying the same thing, note that one should try to avoid harm, or could try to avoid harm, without having a clear idea of what the good is. And one could seek to do the good without knowing the harmful consequences. Thus, each principle supports the other. Finally, the principle of justice holds that one ought always to receive what one is due. This might include, for example, respect and a thorough and honest diagnosis. On their face, these principles are praiseworthy, and one should treat oneself and others as autonomous, beneficently, non-maleficently, and justly. But this theory falls short as an effective synthesis of the basic moral theories of conduct. In the first place, Beecham and Childress claim that these principles are universally applicable beyond medical ethics. But the relationship of doctor to patient does not necessarily raise the same moral issues as other leader-follower relationships. For example, a patrol officer has a duty to obey a superior's orders in a way that a patient does not have to obey a doctor's orders. A second challenge to principlism is that the list of 4 principles is arbitrary in at least 2 ways. For one thing, it's incomplete. Why not add to this list competence, diligence, honesty, loyalty, and the like? These may be implied in the list of 4, but they are not explicit. Also, the list lacks a theoretical framework. For example, should we respect autonomy because of the consequences of doing so? Because of a rule or social norm? Because of a duty? Principlism is not clear on this count. Finally, a morally bad person might apply all 4 of these principles unthinkingly, or with ulterior motives, such as avoiding a lawsuit. So this theory doesn't get at moral character in the way virtue theory does, as we'll see in short order. A fourth and popular candidate for a theory that attempts to synthesize the 3 basic theories of moral conduct and point to a theory of moral character is Communitarianism. In its broadest sense, Communitarianism attacks the individualism that underlies much ethical and political theory. The United States may be the most obvious proponent of individual rights, which we may contrast with many political systems, especially socialist countries, that give more moral weight to the community as a whole. In this age of globalization, there is something appealing about the idea of taking into account the effects of our actions on others, thus tilting the moral scale away from egoism and toward utilitarianism and altruism, for example. But what sort of community is at work here? Communitarians often have many answers, some as examples, others as the preferred paradigm. The family is a useful example for digging further into communitarianism. In the nuclear family, the rights and responsibilities of the parents and the children are mutually defined and honored or dishonored. Here, individualism gives or should give way to the communitarian interest. The same might be said of a corporation, with the leader standing in as a parent and the follower standing in as children. But different theories of leadership challenge this paternalistic paradigm. And other sorts of community, such as political, like-minded, historically connected, or religious, leave open the question of proper rights and responsibilities. We can agree on the importance of taking into account as much as possible the consequences of our actions on others. And we can agree that unless we are individuals living on a deserted island, we are members of many communities. But this doesn't give communitarianism the sort of moral authority it claims. For one thing, as the previous slide suggests, the concept of community is overly broad. Time and interest permitting, you might look at works defending communitarianism, such as those by Amitai Etzioni, Alistair McIntyre, and Michael Sandel, and note how much they disagree about the scope and limits of communitarianism and about its moral implications. Moreover, while communitarianism prescribes certain behaviors to the individual, some might object that the theory does not capture fully the individual rights and the responsibilities of the individual moral agent, both of which are important concerns for leadership ethics. This lecture and the previous lecture have considered 4 candidates for the most effective theoretical attempt at synthesizing the 3 basic theories of moral conduct into a theory of moral character. As with the basic theories of moral conduct, consequentialism, regularism, and deontology, these 4 synthesizing theories have something to offer moral leadership. Justice, caring, autonomy, beneficence, and concern for one's community are morally significant. But to stop with any of these 4 theories would deprive us of the benefits of virtue theory and the corresponding theory of moral responsibility, which are our next topics.